So this will be my last 30/30 video. It's been quite the month. Made it through, had a poem for every day. Some were a little bit mentally and emotionally exhausting, but I managed through. I did keep to the actual drafting time, 10 minutes, whole month. Only did 10 minutes drafting on each poem. So very proud of that. Did only 10 minutes in rhythming for each poem as well. So, and I feel like that really shows for my friends who write meter or who just love metrical poetry. You can go on over to the Tupelo 30/30 page and check out the poems for the month. And you can tell which times I was reading a section of Evangeline that had better meter, that he was doing less substitutions, because it got into my head a little bit more. Because 10 minutes is just not enough time for me to really in rhythm if I intend to write in meter. And for these poems, I wasn't necessarily intending for the poems to come out in meter, so it's okay. It's a win-win. Research definitely did more than 10 minutes on every single one. Sometimes it would be like 5 hours worth of research, and it's still not enough. Still not enough to really do these women justice. So I wanted to do a video where I tell you about the last week of poems that I did, so that you know who those folks are, and then let you know what I intend to do with this project in the long term and the sort of shorter term future. So for that last week, poems that appeared, we had one about Smita Talwalkar, and she was a Marathi actress, but not just an actress, because she was also a director, she was a producer, and she started her own school, right? Her own, not just, and it seemed to not just be an acting school, it seemed to be a school that also did production, like video production kind of stuff. So she seemed pretty amazing. And one of the interesting facts about her is that she would sometimes get sick of the craft services catering stuff that they would have on set. And so she would just make everybody food. And that's what my poem talks about. So also had a poem up about Cassandra Harris, and she is an actress. She was in James Bond film. She was also in episodes of Remington Steele. She is Pierce Brosnan's first wife, and he did an interview about her about 4 months after she had passed. He did an interview for People magazine, and I took a decent amount of the stuff that went into the poem or sort of informed or inspired the poem comes from that interview that he did about her. Also one up about Kale Chernin, and she is a Canadian, she was a Canadian actress, director. Just, she seemed amazing. I watched a few interviews with her. She just she seemed amazing. She said some really insightful things about the process of becoming who you're meant to be as an artist. And I worked some of that into the poem that appeared on the 30/30. It's really rough draft. These are all fairly rough drafts, and that's the point and the hope, is to just get those poems out, right? So Kel Chernin, there's also awards that are given out, grants, fellowships given out to female Canadian filmmakers, stage directors, and I think there's also a social media, like a media production sort of component too, where people can donate to a fund and then it funds these awards. So folks creating stuff that isn't sort of the mainstream work. So the kind of stuff that she would have wanted. And I get a little emotional. It makes it hard for me to find words. But again, I'm not writing scripts for these. I refuse to write scripts for these videos. I'm just not going to do it. Because that seems like work, doesn't it? Writing a script, that seems like work. I'm just going to ramble. I'm just going to ramble at you. All right. So also Lavette George. She was a Broadway actress. Most famous, she had two things that she was most famous for. One was the musical of musicals, parentheses, the musical. And it was a musical in its own right, but it was also, each section was a parody of a different style of musical, which is kind of cool. She was big in Germany. She was in the original German Starlight Express musical and was on the original cast recording for that as well. Because it was all like late 80s, early 90s, it's difficult to find these things online for me. I don't possess the research skills. And again, I was taking more than 10 minutes, but I wasn't taking research trips to go find some Broadway archives so I could see her. Anyway, so there's a poem about her. Dime Brown. She was a reality star for MTV. Specifically, The Challenge was what she was most on. And she was going through treatment during many of her times on The Challenge. So her cancer journey was very, very, very public. So she also went to Florida State University, which is also one of my alma maters. I did my doctorate there. So in the poem about her, I tried to work in some stuff. She was a DG, so I tried to work in some imagery and allusions to being a DG, as well as to Florida State in that poem for her as well. And Veronica Castaigne was another Broadway actress. Lots of Broadway actresses came out this last particular week. So you can read about her. There isn't a lot about her that I could find. So, although she did write a letter to, I think that was the editor of Theater World, asking him to please stop printing her age every time they talked about her. And she was like, okay, I'm old enough that you need to not do that. Woman of the age of discretion. So I worked that in as well. And the final poem that is up that's about an individual person was about Ellie Mayday. And she was a Canadian model who, it's fucking heartbreaking. Like, the day she got asked to come to New York for a big modeling contract was also the day that she found out she had ovarian cancer. So for her, not her entire modeling career, but sort of when her modeling career started to take off, that was all part and parcel of going on chemo and having surgeries. She was also very open on Instagram about what her life was like going through chemo and with ovarian cancer. And, social media is what it is, right? And so people would say things to her about like that she was using her cancer for to get famous. She was just using her cancer to get famous. You know what my response is about that? And she was very sweet. She seems like a very sweet individual, which I am not. I am, but I'm not, right? And folks who are watching this who know me know what I mean by that. But yeah, my response to that would be, well, at least it's good for fucking something, right? Because I mean, you've got it anyway. Whether you use it to get famous or not, you still had it. You still have to go through it. Those comments just felt a little ridiculous to me. People also, because she was a plus size model, when she started to lose weight because of the cancer treatment and because of the cancer, people were like saying sort of this like you've turned against the plus size world sort of thing. She fucking had chemo. She couldn't keep food down. Right? Like, yeah, she would have kept the food down if she could. That would have been her preference. People can just be as my granny would say, big ucks. People could be big ucks. That's for sure. My final 30-30 poem was a poem that talks about the reason that I did the project. One of the reasons I did the project, which is this desire within me to figure out, what do I need to do to stay in remission? What do I need to do to make sure it does not come back? Because chemo sucked. Not as much as being dead though, right? And I don't ever want to go through that again. And so it's what can I do? Or what patterns do I see? What can I, and early detection is really the key. So keeping up on symptoms and being aware of what feels different for you. Of course, the challenge is once you've been through chemo, your body is completely different. And so it's difficult to tell what is a result of, what is a change because of chemo. And I also went through menopause at the same time. So what is because of those things, and what is the cancer coming back? Cancer better not come back. I don't want it. So it better not. So those are the poems that have been written. And I've got a bunch of poems for later. So these, all the poems that I did during 30-30, I just drew randomly out of my stack. I've got a list of people where I went through and actually selected some folks and then went back and looked more at the listing of people who had ovarian cancer to see if there was anybody I may have missed or somebody who could be, sort of interesting to write about. And the folks that I'm going to write about, or at least try to at some point in the future, Carol Bly, who is the poet Robert Bly's wife. She was also a writer in her own right. I would like to write one about her. Chris Evert, the tennis player, I would like to write about her. Jessica Tandy, who is kind of near and dear to my heart for kind of many reasons. One of which is that we share a birthday. Apparently we share a birthday and a disease. She also was really good friends with one of my favorite writers growing up, which is Susan Cooper. And then after Jessica Tandy's death, her husband ended up marrying Susan Cooper. So I think, am I remembering that correctly? I feel like I'm remembering that right. Should do more research again before I just, but again, that's where a script would come in handy, yes? Or editing, better editing, sure. The next person on the list is Akemi Negishi. And the reason, she was a Japanese actress. And the reason that I think that could be interesting to do more research on her and to write about her is she overlaps a little bit with Shizuku Kazagi, who I wrote about during the very first week of 30-30. And so I think it could be interesting, I don't know, see if their poems could speak to each other in any way, or what comes up, right? Also going to write a poem about Robert Eads. You're surprised, aren't you? So Robert Eads was a transgender man who lived in Georgia. And when he was diagnosed, it took a while, took a bit to get diagnosed with ovarian cancer, like it always does with ovarian cancer, but more so for him. And he went from doctor to doctor to doctor, and no one would treat him. No, none of the doctors he was sent to in Georgia would treat him. And so I have watched a few clips from the documentary about that. It's called Southern Comfort. I won't say I look forward to watching the full documentary. I don't. I think it's going to be heart-wrenching. But what else can I say that look forward to? I will be watching the documentary, and I hope and am pretty sure that I will get some good stuff for a poem about him, so that I can honor him within this collection that I'm working on. Kathy Bates also had ovarian cancer. She is in remission, as far as I can tell from online. She seems to be doing fine and doing various work. So just, like how I just assume everybody knows who Kathy Bates is. I'm like, she's amazing. Everybody knows who she is. It's fine. She's in Misery, various other things. She had The Office. If you like The Office, she was also in The Office. Candida Royale, who was a porn actress, and then she became a porn director, an adult film director. And one of the things she really worked on was making porn that women would like. So she's kind of amazing in that groundbreaking way. And so I look forward to writing a poem about her. Gilda Radner. That one's going to be heartbreaking. Again, I'm just assuming people know who Gilda Radner is, but she was on SNL when they were like early days of SNL. She was married to Gene Wilder, and she was in like Haunted Honeymoon. So I look forward to getting to know more about her and being able to honor her. Also, a poem on Monique Martineau. She was a French woman who died from ovarian cancer in the mid-80s. Her husband was a physician and scientist who was a big cryogenics proponent. So he froze her. And then when he passed away in 2002, he also was frozen. The French government was like, no, you cannot have bodies just sitting around in your freezers. And so the French government was trying to get their son to dispose of their bodies properly. And but eventually there was a power outage, and so the bodies thawed out and were cremated. So that's going to be an interesting poem. I'm not sure if I can find much about her, so it may not actually be a poem that ends up going anywhere, because I may not be able to get enough information. Coretta Scott King, who was Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife, had ovarian cancer. Joanna Silver Gordon, she is a woman who a law was made about gynecological cancers and detection. And so I'm interested to find out more about her. Margaret Mary Vochko, who, if you remember a few years ago, that there was a adjunct at Duquesne who died and didn't have health insurance. And that was we talked about that a lot in the plight of adjuncts. That's who it was. She was in the process of going through treatment for ovarian cancer when she passed away, but I think it was technically a heart attack that killed her during treatment. Because I want to have a few people who are still alive, we have Kobe Smulders, went through treatment for ovarian cancer when she was in her 20s, which apparently it was like the third season of How I Met Your Mother. And now I want to go back and rewatch that season because I've loved that show. I'll go back and watch that, see what that was all about. Also, Christiane Amanpour also went through treatment for ovarian cancer and is still alive. So I look forward to researching more about them. Madeline Kahn, who has passed away, also had ovarian cancer. She was and a lot of Mel Brooks stuff. So you may know her from Young Frankenstein. What else was she in? A lot of stuff. Oh, Clue. How could I forget about Clue? Flames. Okay. I look forward to researching her. And finally, Dorothy Brunson. And she was the first African-American woman to own a radio station. So I look forward to finding out more about her. And I've just realized some things about wearing this particular dress. That one, it's again, this color for some reason messes with the color. It gets red periodically, and I can see that happening. So my apologies if you're sitting there watching it and I'm like disco flashing red to green. It's hard for some reason for it to get the color right on this particular shirt, this kind of the shade of sort of like teal. The other thing is that I can tell that periodically my port scar is showing, and I don't show that often. I kind of forget it's there until, in this kind of situation, I'm sitting here talking blah, 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 and I look and I can see that y'all can see little bits of my port scar peeping out there. My body did not take to the port very well. They put it in when I was in the middle of treatment instead of at the beginning. And my body formed this sort of like giant bubble around it. So it was kind of useless. Like it was hard to use for the nurses to even get it to work because my body had just encased it. Like, what is this? Is this another cancer? What is this? We don't like this. Couldn't move my arm past here. Chemo, good times. It is actually 4 years ago today was my final infusion. I have a lot of poems that I've been working on about that process, so you'll get to read them someday, I hope. So part of the 30/30 was a fundraiser. Thanks to 25 donors, I was able to raise $810 for Tupelo Press. So yay! Thank you all the donors. And thank you to Tupelo Press for giving me this opportunity to do this. This is the third time I've done it, so I'm glad that they weren't like, no, if you're having trouble writing stuff, that's on you. So I am thankful that they let me come back. What I will be doing with these poems is I'm going to take a little bit of time off, probably about a month or so. And when I say time off, I just mean I'm going to work on other stuff, just not these particular poems. Then I'm going to start doing more research on those other the other folks I want to write poems about, looking at what I've actually done this month after I get a little time away, because they seem either like shit or they seem completely perfect and done. And I need a little bit of distance from them. So I'm going to get a little distance and then write more poems and check those out. And what I'd like to do is add them into a collection with poems where I'm talking about my own experiences. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. I had to think about cancer a lot this month. And I was supposed to have my 6-month checkup, and it just kept getting pushed back. So now it's like the end of October, but we're still gonna do my labs. Because I was like, can we just get my labs out of the way? So my labs are next week. Fingers crossed for good C8 results and all that. Thanks for stopping by.